George Galanopolous is the head coach of the Ugandan men's national team and is also the head coach of the NBA G League team, the Texas Legends. Coach George has worked with the Ugandan team since 2017 and more recently led the team to a 2-1 record in Group E of the 2021 AfroBasket qualifiers. Coach, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it, guys.
Congratulations on a great window in Uganda. You guys had a tough first loss to Egypt, but then went on to beat Morocco and Cape Verde. Tell us a bit about the game.
Yeah, a disappointing first game. We were with them and in the game for about 3 quarters, and then it just kind of fell apart in the fourth. You know, Egypt is a very aggressive defensive team, and I think it kind of sped us up, and it was a look that was given to us defensively that we weren't very familiar with. And, I personally didn't have the guys truly prepared for that sort of hectic defensive style to go against. So it kind of unraveled there in the fourth, a little disappointing, but definitely not disappointed in the effort. Our guys were right there, and we put ourselves in a position to compete and win the game. But just like always, it's very process-based with us. You watch the film, you make sure guys get their rest. You get back on the court the next day for shoot around. You figure out how to be better from the night before, and also how to best prepare for the next game that you have that night. And our guys did great with that. You forgive kind of what happened, but you don't forget, right? You got to learn from your mistakes, and our guys are very good at kind of reflecting as a group and as individuals on what they need to do to get better. And we have great leadership on the floor with a lot of the players that we have, guys from Uganda that have been with the group since 2017, since I've been there, and dating back to 2015 and 13 even. And, the guys that we've had, that are newer to the group in the last couple years, especially this year, assimilated themselves well and were able to help us kind of push forward in those last 2 games. So really exciting nail biters the last 2 games. Thankfully, our offense kind of pushed us forward. Got to figure out the defensive end for sure, but there's a lot to build on. This group, especially since I've been coaching, hasn't won a lot of games. So just to simply be on the other end of that result was really gratifying. I don't know how many more speeches I can give to the guys saying I'm proud of them and their effort, but we didn't get the result we wanted. So it was great just to see that team morale after a win. It was something that makes all the work and the heartbreak and the process worth it for sure.
Coach, I wanted to ask you, what is the identity of your team?
The identity,
right? What would you say?
Yeah, I would like to say, first and foremost, before we dive into the basketball, I think the identity of our team, the core and the bones of it, is our willingness to play for each other. And I think you can maybe sense it on TV even, how involved our bench is, how much these guys huddle on the court in between plays. Their communication with each other during the game is at a higher level than I've ever seen and been around. Their willingness and their want to communicate positively during the game to help each other, whether it's from the bench or whether it's on the 5 players on the court, it's at another level. And that, I think, is our identity more than anything, is our willingness to work together for the betterment of the team. And there are no egos on the team. Everybody is really pulling in the same direction to win for this country and to win for each other. And that, I think, is at the core of our identity. If you want to get into the basketball aspect, I wish our identity was more that we're a defensive-minded team, which I don't think it's. I don't think it's lack of effort. I think it's more my fault, and I need to be the one to clarify what we're doing defensively even better, to make sure that these guys are all on the same page. So I got to do a better job of that. But they play super hard on both ends of the floor, and offensively they share the ball, and it's something that I think goes back to. It's a result of how they feel about each other and what our identity is, which is that we're about the team, and they understand to be about the team, you got to move the ball. To be about the team, you got to find a great shot over an okay shot. Celebrate each other's successes. That, I think, is at the core of all of it. So hopefully it just continues to move in a more positive direction as we go further.
But let's take it back. How did you guys prepare for this window?
Yeah, so we had 2 weeks, maybe even less than that, 10, 11 days of preparation in Egypt beforehand. There are conversations that go on constantly between myself, the players, and the coaching staff that is based in Uganda leading up to the tournament, just to make sure those guys are prepared and ready to go. But as far as the 2 weeks leading up to it at training camp, you got to do the best you can with the time that you have in the gym. You're given an hour and a half of gym time. A lot of times the gym times are changing, and you might have an 8:30 in the morning practice and then a 10 p.m. night practice. It's just a lot of different things you got to navigate. So it's my job as a coach and our job as a coaching staff just to make sure that you are being as efficient with your time as possible. You're being as clear with your teaching and your principles as possible, and helping the players understand how we want to play on both ends of the floor and how we're going to get there and how we're going to do it. And it's been a struggle for me at times, just as a younger coach coming out here every time. I become a much better coach in 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks coaching this team, just considering the circumstances, than I do in a lot of other aspects of my career. It's quite the challenge, and it's been a lot of fun. The players make it easier to prepare because they're so locked in and they're understanding of the limited amount of time that we have. So you just got to find out how you want to play. You got to be married to the idea of it. You can't be changing things like maybe you change mid-season of a G League season or an NBA season. You have to make sure that the way that you want to play is what you're going to stick to on both ends of the floor, and just drill it on the court, off the court, in film, with the guys individually, and just try to get everybody on the same page as quickly as you can. So it was tough with the preparations, especially with certain guys sprinkling in. We started with 6 players for the first 5 days, then 3 players got there like the next 3 or 4 days, and then our final 2 players that were foreign based, coming from their respective leagues, got there 3 days before the game. So you just got to make sure that you not only have your system in place that everybody understands, but you got to make sure you got good guys that are smart players that just make that seamless transition, and we have that in our guys. So the players, really kudos to them for just coming together that quickly and understanding how best to prepare and be efficient with their time in the short window that we had to prepare for.
Coming from Chicago, and we've seen a lot of great basketball players from Chicago. I mean, the Chicago Bulls were a great basketball team at the time you were growing up. What are you bringing from Chicago to Uganda? How is that translation happening? What exactly is it, and how is it working?
It's an interesting question. I think the first thing that comes to mind that I'm bringing from Chicago is my accent more than anything. I've had to learn over the years how to slow down speaking and speak more clearly and enunciate. Because if I get going too fast, those guys can't understand me. So the communication piece has been really important. But you kind of touched on it, like with the Bulls from a young age. That fueled my love for not only sports, but specifically basketball. And growing up around that era, there was a movement going on when Michael Jordan and the Bulls were winning championships, and they had such a huge impact on the sports culture, not only in Chicago, but I think globally. And just as a kid growing up with posters in your room and a basketball hoop on the driveway and going to the park and playing and thinking that you're Michael Jordan or Pippen or Kukoc, like, the opportunity to have been born into that and raised by it fueled my love for the game at a very young age. And then it just kind of had a domino effect into coaching in high school, and the rest is history. But I think what I've taken from Chicago, I think, is just that love and that passion that I had for the game that was fueled by the Bulls and growing up in an era where basketball became this global phenomenon. So it's something that I'm really grateful for. And my accent and the Chicago Bulls passion, I think, is 2 things that I brought over there.
So, okay, it's funny you say that, because I was going to ask you, do you have issues, some of the terminologies while you're out there playing basketball? Because I could understand, I know that certain things I would say on the court over here, and certain people will look at me like, what are you talking about? Like, for instance, like crashing the boards. I know a lot of people didn't understand that in Tanzania when I first said crashing the boards. Do you have issues at times when you're communicating with your players?
It's funny you said crashing the boards, because that's a specific phrase that, one or two of our guys didn't understand a couple of years ago. And it's, what I had to get past was, when I was young, the initial thought was like, how do these guys not know this? And then you just really have to take a step back and realize it's a completely different country. It's a completely different culture. It's different basketball terminology. It's just different. It's not better or worse or smarter or not. It's just different. And what I've learned over the years, and I've learned the hard way through loss and heartbreak and understanding that there was communication barriers at times, is really slowing down and having that open, honest communication about, does that make sense? Do you guys understand where I'm coming from? What terminology would you like to use for this? That was something that I asked a lot this year was, hey, this is what we call it, because it's a general NBA term. It's a general American term, college basketball, G League, NBA. What do you guys call it? Would it be easier to call it this? What would be easiest to remember? Sometimes they'll look at me and say, call it whatever you want. And it's like, okay, but I at least want to ask and let them know, like, what would be easiest. We changed a couple things terminology wise that I originally wanted, but then as I'm talking to them and we're kind of going through it, I asked, do you guys think that we should call it this? Would this help you remember it better? And some of them said, yeah, let's change it. So I think I need to be, and I have been over the years, a little more open-minded about the communication piece. And I'm very aware that just because they speak English does not mean that we're all on the same page all the time, especially with basketball terminology. So it's an open line of communication that I've had to initiate and really be the driving force in trying to figure out how we maximize how we're playing on the court based on our communication piece.
It's funny you say that, Coach, because in Australia we call ball screens on balls. Okay. And so I went in with the Cameroon team. I'm like, okay, go and set the on ball. And people are like, what's an on ball? And these guys, NBA, EuroLeague, etc., had no idea what I was talking about. We're all speaking the same language, but terminology meant that we had that disconnect.
Yeah. And it really, what it is more than anything is, I think if you have the right outlook and if you have the right perspective, all it is an opportunity to become a better teacher. That's Definitely. It. And that's what I've noticed as a coach, is that I become a better teacher when I go out there, because I really have to be conscious of the things I'm saying, how I'm saying it, and how the players are receiving it and internalizing it. Like, I have to be hyper aware of all of that, as opposed to the G League where we're all on the same page. I could maybe say, hey, you're doing this, and that, and then we're getting into the mid pick and roll. And those guys maybe just know exactly what to do in the mid pick and roll. Whereas here, I might have to break it down even more and let them know their options, or make sure we're on the same page terminology wise. There's just more you need to be aware of when you are combining cultures and two completely different groups of people from across the globe. It just makes me a better teacher, I think, especially if you have that perspective. So it's something I'm actually pretty grateful for. It makes me a better coach.
Now, you touched on briefly, you guys had a great window in terms of offense. You came in as the third best offensive team out of this window, but you finished 12th in the net rating due to a poor defensive rating. How are you guys looking to improve your defense heading into the second round?
Yeah, so first and foremost, we got to go back and watch the film. So there's watching the games, that night afterwards to figure out how you can be better. And then I think once you get back and you kind of reflect on everything, it's watching those games again and watching, on Synergy, all of the clips and different breakdown situations of how we can be better. So that's what I've started already, is just kind of looking back and seeing, okay, like what's the theme here? What is the theme of, where we could be better at defensively, where we failed in certain aspects, and where we were good, and where we can be better, most importantly. So it really just comes from the evaluation standpoint, being in touch with the coaches that are in Uganda, making sure that we're on the same page about how we can be better, how to help the players get better, whether it's breakdown drills or concepts or film, whatever the case may be. But it's just reflecting on it, watching the film, seeing where you could be better, and then trying to figure out how to be better.
Realistically, Cape Verde, Morocco, and Uganda were the bottom 3 defensive teams in this window. Egypt finished 10th. So realistically, of those 3 teams, whoever improves their defense the most is really going to give themselves an advantage.
Yeah, no, and we understand that too. For me, I think evaluating teams and scouting is very important. Obviously, you have to know what other teams' strengths and weaknesses are, and how to exploit those. But for us improving, it's about us. For us improving, it's about really diving into how we can be better, instead of comparing teams and, well, these teams in our window weren't as good defensively, so maybe our offense isn't as good as we thought, or whatever the case may be. We just need to objectively evaluate how we can be better in the areas we need to be better, and it's up to me to really set the stage and help our guys, with a blueprint of how we're going to get there. So that's really all it is. Just very process based. Figure out how we could be better, focus on us, and move forward from there.
All right, so this question here, I'm gonna attack you a little bit, right? First of all, what
Sure.
you bring from Chicago? I know in Chicago they love to play defense, and I did my study on Ish, your star player for Uganda. He used to play defense. Well, at least I've seen some of his highlights playing in Germany and France. And prior to that, in high school, he played a lot of defense. He was one of the worst defensive players in Egypt. He was incredible on offense. He was actually my MVP. I call him as my MVP. I call him out as my MVP. But defensively, he was terrible. What's going on with your team and defense?
Yeah, I just have to ask, what is that just your scouting eye that's saying he was one of the worst defensive in Egypt? Is there a specific stat you have? What is the basis for calling him one of the worst defenders?
Liz, can you please come out with the advanced
Sure.
stats?
I wouldn't call him one of the worst defensive players in the team. I'd have to go and have a look at specifically Group E. I think what's important to know with defensive rating is it's heavily linked to an individual's defensive rating, whereas offensive ratings, there's quite a separation. So Ish's defense as an individual would be brought down by the team for defensive rating. So I guess the question really should be, we didn't see Ish play at his best defensively. Why do you think that was the case?
Yeah, I think it was our system. I think it was my lack of clarity on what we were doing defensively. I think from my perspective, when you have Ish showing up 3 days before our first game, and we don't have any friendlies, and we're just trying to figure it out, doing 2-a-days and making sure we're not, crushing these guys so that their legs are fresh. I need to do a better job of making sure that I'm implementing that system and being super clear about what everybody's role is defensively, how we're playing, what we're going to do, what our base defense is. So I think you can blame that more on the system than anything, because I could pull 50 clips right now of Ish playing NBA level defense from those 3 games, but I think it's, the defensive rating for sure. I think it was more of a system thing than it was actually Ish per se. Yeah, that's what I have to say about that. So defensively, just as a group too, we gave up a ton of middle drives when our philosophy is no middle. Once they got middle, our rotations weren't very clean out of it. We didn't guard spot ups very well. So it's just different things you got to reflect on. I would take the blame for that more than anything. Again, I wouldn't say by any stretch Ish was one of the worst defenders, but that's why I asked what the number was in regards to it. Because Ish came up huge for us, especially down the stretch defensively. So more of a system thing, I think, than anything.
Yeah, in terms of I just had a look. In terms of players who played over 18 minutes in Group E, Ish sits at about 15 in terms of defensive rating out of 21. So, and look, there's a lot of other Ugandan players below him. So I think realistically, like you say, Coach, it's more about the system than anything else. And it was a high tempo pace group. So No one played exceptional defense.
No,
maybe-
not from our group especially. So again, it's having. I think we were more, looking back, and I think we were more clear about how we wanted to play offensively, which is why we saw so much success on that end. And with the shot making and whatnot, like the players were empowered to play that way and to play fast. And we really defined what fast meant. So defensively, we were doing a lot of different things. We threw in a 3-2 zone that like we just didn't practice that much. Like we didn't practice a lot of the rotations and whatnot, just because of lack of time. So it's really up to me to figure out, once again, after my fourth time coaching these guys, what is worth spending the most time on and how you need to maximize your time on the court when you are practicing for that short period of time in the 2 weeks leading up to it. So just something for me to reflect on and figure out how to be better. And I can't promise anything other than, I'm going to work really hard with our coaching staff to figure out how to be better on that end. But, Ish is...
No doubt.
Coach, let me just clarify that. When I meant to say, what I meant to say was, Ish is not your average player, right? I don't think he's an average player. Look, watching him play out there, especially in that tournament, like I said, to me, he was the MVP out there. I actually called him as the MVP. And I've seen some of the highlights. I've watched him play prior to that. I just felt like his effort on offense and his effort on defense, they were just two totally different things. It could be the role that you assigned. That could be the case. I don't know what it is. That's why I asked you, because maybe he plays a different role when he plays in Europe in comparison to the role that you assigned him, because he's scoring a lot of buckets. He doesn't score as many points in Europe or in college. He never scored like that. He's scoring a lot. And I spoke to him a little bit and I asked him a question. I was like, why do you check out? I felt like he was checking out. This guy was a monster at the beginning. They couldn't stop him. They couldn't stop him at all. I'm talking about Egypt. I'm talking about Cape Verde. At the beginning of the game, nobody could stop him. This guy was scoring at will. And then there's certain stretches he disappears. I don't see him on offense. I don't see him on defense. Maybe by saying he was one of the worst defensive players, meaning out of the top players in the tournament, defensively, at times he would take plays off. I felt that way, it's the eye test. And then I looked at the stats. She came out with the stats and he wasn't up there in defensive rating, but he's up there in terms of offensively. He was just incredible. So I just wanted to understand, was it the role? Did you want him to conserve energy so he can play better offense, so put up those kind of points? I didn't quite understand. That was my question.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, for sure. Yeah, for sure it makes sense. First of all, I would never tell a player to conserve energy for the offensive end, which would compromise his defense. I would never ask a player to do that. I think players maybe do that subconsciously a little bit, and Ish had to handle the ball a lot. Ish also got in foul trouble the first couple games, which forced him out of the game. So there's that, obviously. And then, I don't think there's definitely, the guy's not a perfect player. Like there's 3, 4, 5 plays that I could think of right now where we showed on film, like, yo, Ish, you got to be better than this. Like you got to rotate over, you got to be here, you got to be there. Just like everybody has those clips and those moments, especially when they're handling the ball a lot, especially offensively. Ish has never been a guy to score the ball, like to be a primary scorer. Ish has never been a guy to, have the ball in his hands as much as he had with us. He has that personality, I think, inherently to be just a team player that sometimes blends in more than he is the guy. And it took a little bit of convincing, like, yo, you can grab the ball off the board and you could just push it up the court. Like these guys are jogging back, like just put your head down and go to the basket instead of maybe jogging the ball up the court, surveying the floor, looking to pass it. It's kind of finding that happy medium and that sweet spot of, being the man and scoring and making plays and still being a team player and involving your teammates. And I think what you saw was that last game, him finally figuring it out, exactly how to play on the offensive end and how we want him to play. Sometimes it takes telling him and reminding him how good he is. Like, really, I don't even think Ish understands, and I've told him this, how good he actually is and the potential he has to be the player that he could be. So sometimes it's just, you know, giving the guy a little kick in the ass, a little motivation, saying, hey, like, you're the best player on the court right now, and you're just kind of blending in right now. I don't think it's anything other than needing to build awareness about it and just understanding, hey, I'm one of the best players. I need to put my imprint on this game. So I think, you know, it's a work in progress. He's never been that guy. You know, he's never scored over 30 points in a college game, in a professional game, at any time in his career. So, you know, what you're seeing is this player that you expect to be so elite because of how he played, yet he's never played like that before. So he's learning himself too about who he is as a player, you know, and just the impact that he can leave. You know, I'm hoping, and I think so, because we talked about it. His confidence grew a lot in this window. It doesn't matter what the competition is. Doesn't matter if you're playing at the NBA level, if you're playing G League, if you're playing Euro League, if you're playing FIBA Afrobasket. Like, these are tough teams, and it's not easy to play that well in these games. It's just not easy. Like, you got to be focused, you got to be locked in, you got to be good. So to answer your question in full, like, he's still learning about who he is as a player and how he can impact the game.
Awesome. Now, Ishmael Wainwright was probably the big superstar of Group E. Can you tell us how he ended up playing for Uganda?
Yeah, so Mike Schmitz, who is our assistant coach and a longtime good friend of mine, is very immersed in the scouting world. You know, does the ESPN draft work and has a lot of connections overseas and watches a lot of players. He knows every player that's relevant who's, you know, 15 years old and up, pretty much. So he's been a very valuable asset for us in identifying talent, and you know, he knows a lot of scouts around the world, so he gets very valuable information about guys. And Ish is somebody that he's seen play a lot, and he's followed him since college. And he knows a lot of people that work in Germany, where he played last year, in France, and he was able to get a lot of good information on Ish, of who he is as a player and as a person. And you know, Mike is very understanding of how we want to play, and I think his experience with us for the last 2 years has helped him understand too of what type of player and person that we need for this team that'll help all of us reach our potential. So, you know, he came to me with the name Ish Wainwright, and I actually hadn't heard of him before. So I watched some film and thought he fit perfectly, had a conversation with him, talked to his agent, and it's something that they were interested in. And like I said, the conversation I had with Ish, you could just feel through the phone what type of person he was. The excitement that he felt about playing for us, and, you know, not just for, you know, a passport or future opportunities. It was for, he really wanted to help the team. He thought it was going to be such a cool experience. So, you know, he wasn't blowing smoke or anything like that. He really did believe that, because he came to play and he treated the guys well, assimilated himself well, and it couldn't have worked out better. So, you know, props to Mike Schmitz for you know, identifying that talent and the right type of person for us. And I just didn't mess it up. That was my goal, was not mess up the recruiting process. So yeah, it worked out.
Even from an outside perspective, you could definitely tell how well he fit in. You don't get a lot of American players who assimilate that well into a national team. So I was definitely blown away by his performance on the court and what sounds like his behavior off the court as well. You also had some standout performances from Jimmy and Robertson, as well as your point guard, Tony, and your forward, Deng. How did you get the most out of these guys?
Yeah, well, I think probably the most important aspect of them playing well this past window is their experience. This is Deng's third time playing with the team. Jimmy's been playing with the team for years now. He's been there. He and Robinson have been there since I've been coaching in 2017. This is Tony's second tournament on the national stage, but he plays with those guys in Uganda. So he and Jimmy have a nice little rapport, as well as the other guys
City Oilers, right?
Yeah, the City Oilers, exactly. So I think the experience playing with each other and playing on this stage is by far the most important aspect of their improvement and how they came to play this window, basically. So as far as I'm concerned, with my approach to those guys is, especially in a short amount of time, is really opening up the lines of communication with them, understanding them as people, which now I've gotten to know them really well, but also asking their opinion on things, making sure that the message that we're getting across is clear, asking them how they feel about different things that we're implementing, whether it's offensive or defensive, and just really opening up those lines of communication between everybody to make sure that everybody understands how we want to play. And, for me, I think, especially in a short amount of time, as a coach, I think coaches a lot of times like to have like that control over what's happening. And the reality is, the most important thing is that these players feel empowered and confident to play the way they feel comfortable playing. So it's kind of finding that happy medium as a coach of, how can I give them the proper structure with freedom to play within that structure. And a lot of that had to do with, there were just a lot of conversations that were had between all of us. And, it's up to me to identify that talent and those skill sets of everybody and figure out how to put them together and just kind of guide them in the right direction. But you saw, like, off of a miss, Jimmy Anabu dribbling as fast as he can up the court to get a paint touch and early layup. I mean, I didn't teach him that, I'll tell you that much. But Ish Wainwright too. All of these guys, they just fit and they complement each other really well. And it's just communicating with them, over communicating about how we want to play, how they feel about how we're playing, and just how to get the most out of each other.
You're originally from Chicago, right?
Yeah, Buffalo Grove, Illinois, about 40 minutes north of Chicago.
So you grew up a Chicago Bulls fan, right?
I did, yeah, diehard Bulls fan.
Okay, good. So how did you get to Uganda?
Yeah, so in 2016-17, I was an assistant coach for the team that I am the head coach for now, the Texas Legends. And the coach at the time, his name is Bob McKinnon, lived in North Carolina, and one of our players, Stanley Ochidi for Uganda, lives in North Carolina as well. And I think they connected on LinkedIn, and they met at like a local rec center or YMCA where there was some pickup being played. And they got connected, and Uganda was just starting to kind of get on the map internationally and starting to play in more tournaments and qualifying tournaments, and Afrobasket they qualified for. And they had reached out to him to coach the team. He's an older gentleman that's been around for a long time. He's got a ton of experience, great coach. And he couldn't do it that summer for 2017 Afrobasket because of hip surgery. So he called me into his office in March of that year and asked me if I'd like to be the head coach of the Ugandan national team. All I knew about Uganda was that it was a country in Africa. That was about it. And, I just always said yes to great opportunities like that. I think the fear of the unknown is something that kind of drives me more than it does scare me away from taking the opportunity. So I just kind of shrugged my shoulders and said, yeah, just let me know what I got to do. And we met with Stanley Ochidi and Mohamed Santur, who is the GM of our team. And, he told them that he couldn't do it, but he recommended me for it. And thankfully they agreed. And over some pizza in North Carolina and a handshake, I became the head coach of the Ugandan national team. So, it's funny what starts off as something that you accept selfishly for your resume or for your career. And that's what I was thinking about at the time, that it would be good for me. You don't understand and realize until you're going through it what it actually is about. And, the fact that I've made so many good relationships out there. I've been able to go to Uganda and meet the people out there, and they've accepted me into their culture and into everything that they're doing and into their relationships. Like, you realize it's so much more than something you put on the resume. It's an experience. It's an opportunity for me, with the resources that we have here, to help a country. and to potentially, change or help the basketball landscape in that country from the grassroots level. You just realize it's so much more than just what I originally thought as a young kid that was just looking for some coaching experience. So it's been really gratifying, and something that I'm happy I said yes to, because it's turned into something that just continues to be more and more special, and it holds a special place in my heart for sure.
Well, Coach, thanks for joining us. It was great to get your insight. And I know Karabani's got one last question.
Yes, Coach, just before you go, we usually have one question. I know you're not from Uganda, but you are representing Uganda. Mm-hmm. Our question usually is, why should we come to Uganda? Why Uganda? Tell us something about it.
Like the actual country?
The country, not the team, the country.
First and foremost, the people are incredible. They're so nice. They've accepted me from the moment that I stepped foot there a year ago. It's a beautiful country. There's a lot of, I think it was Winston Churchill that called it the Pearl of Africa.
Yeah.
There's incredible parts of it that I still haven't seen, just pictures. So I'm looking forward to the next time I go back. However long I got to be there to coach, I want to go there a week before and just travel and see the safaris and see Lake Victoria and all those things. So there's just, the nature there apparently is incredible, and it's a lot of places, a lot of that I haven't seen. And again, just the culture, the people. I got a Ugandan playlist on my Spotify, so I love the music too. Yeah, there's good food, good drink, good people, good music. It's just good vibes. I love it anytime I go over there. So yeah, if you like living life that way, then I highly recommend going to Uganda.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Coach. Wishing you all the best.